Hey, I'm Ronnie Floyd, a brother of the Otter of the Waccamaw Indian People. I'm going to be demonstrating some of the primitive living skills from long ago. I'm going to do the bow drill today. I'm using red cedar. I think this is cypress wood. I call it driftwood cypress. It's been floating around in the river for hundreds of years, really light and fluffy. I've got some shredded up bark here, some cattail down. And the bow just means we're using a bow with a string on it to spin the drill bit. Got a hand piece to hold it. I'll get a little bit of oil off my face. Make this end spin real well. And let's see what we got. I have to get about 600 degrees Fahrenheit and the little sawdust that's coming out for it to ignite. And we should have a little baby coal down there. And when you look at the boards, you'll notice that there's little notches cut where you're drilling. That lets the powder fall out and keeps it condensed in there and warm and insulated from the wind. So now we have a little baby coal there. So the biggest fire in the world can start from just this tiniest spark. And there goes our fire. We'll put that in there. Got a little bit of extra cattail down in there to get it going. And I'll try to build up our fire a second before we move on to our next thing. One way that Indian or Native people could cook when they didn't have a clay pot or for steel came along or stone bowls and all was to put rocks in the fire. This is soapstone, so you just place it in the fire. I've already got several others put in there. I've got some that we call baked clay objects. It's just a clay ball made just like you would make pottery or a brick. Put them in there, they get really hot, and we'll go and come back in a minute and I'll show you how to cook without having to have a stone or steel pot. Okay, we've been trapping, we've been hunting a little bit this morning. We caught some food. We talked about cooking with rocks. I've got a turtle shell bowl here. I could also use an animal's hide that you just killed. You skin them out, make a little basin out of it, tie it up in a tripod, fill it full of water, cook right in animal skin as well. I do that with the hair on the outside, however, though. But we got a turtle shell bowl here today. I could do this same thing with a wooden bowl because we can't put these in the fire. But let's see if we can cook our little meal that we caught today. Now this method, what we call rock boiling, actually starts boiling the water instantly. If you put a pot on the stove, you have to heat up the pot first. So a very effective way of cooking food. I know somebody used to backpack in really high altitudes. That's how he still cooked his food. He would heat up rocks in the fire, and it was more efficient than using a backpacking stove because of low oxygen levels. And of course, what you do here when it starts boiling like you want it, you can, as the rocks cool off, you just take them out, put them back in the fire, and keep rotating the rocks back and forth in out of the fire, and cooking with it, just rotating them and everything. But it's a very efficient and fast way to cook your food. People say, well, what about the ash? Well, ash basically has no taste, and probably the little bit of lye you may get from some of the ash probably wouldn't be a bad thing anyway to help with intestinal parasites, but I normally blow it off a little bit. There's not very much on there anyway. Another way that you have containers is to use fire as a tool and to burn out a bowl, and I use fire to burn out the middle there. I put clay or mud around here to control it where I want it to burn, and that's how these little containers here were made. You can make spoons the same way. That's one I've kind of gotten started. I normally carve the outside when I'm completely done burning out the inside part first though. And so you can make spoons of all shapes and sizes. And like I said, this is one way you could cook with these types of containers without having to have a clay pot or a stone pot. Pottery came out not too long ago as well. It's not super old, but in the upper part of South Carolina, North Carolina, they have soapstone. And soapstone is soft enough you can carve it out, and they made huge bowls out of these, and it conducted heat super well. So you could put these in the fire and cook with them just like you can a clay pot. And pottery was unique because you could make it whatever size and it was relatively light. A bowl that would be big enough to cook for a family out of that might weigh as much as a cinder block out of a soapstone bowl. And then gourds have been around for thousands of years. They make really great containers, bowls, and stuff to eat out of, stuff to keep things dry, or things to keep water in. And gourds actually sweat a little bit like we do. So even on a hot day like today, if I hung this out here in the sunshine, the water inside would still be relatively cool, and much cooler than if you put a plastic bottle out here for an hour. So it does keep it relatively cool, and it does sweat a little bit, which helps evaporate and cool off the water inside. So another container you could cook in with the hot rocks, as well as keep dry things in or keep water in. So baskets, we still have them around our houses today. They were very valuable back then as well. Cordage is something that holds the world together. You think about even your clothes and stuff, just made out of little tiny strings that's woven together, makes them extremely strong. So in the primitive world and stuff, you know, string was entirely important, making shelters, traps, your tools, things like that and all. And when we say we make a rope out of bark on a tree, a lot of times people are always thinking about what's on the outside. But what you do is you take and soak the bark and start taking out the cambium layers, the inner bark. They'll shred out and thin out and all, and get very thin. And you can make cordage out of these. So I'm going to show you how to make a real short piece of cordage. Now if I was going to make a really long piece of cordage like some of these, you can make them as long as you like. You don't fold it in half typically, because then I can splice in other pieces as I go, and it makes it stronger not splicing it in one place. But just for the sake of a little demonstration now, I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to do what they call thigh rolling. And once you get the paper round, a lot of you have done this. Some girls now it's not a braid, it's when they twist their hair just 2 strands. But you notice as I start putting that together, it does make its own rope kind of. But we want it prettier than that, so I'm going to take and fold it in half. And then as I thigh roll it and stuff, now it kind of makes it itself. And that's just a real easy way to make cordage. But the other way to make it is just by simply doing it one piece at a time. Is I'll turn in a clockwise fashion away from me. I wrap towards me, which is counterclockwise. So wrap clockwise, twist counterclockwise. And just keep going till you run out, then add another fiber in. Now with a big piece of fiber like this, a lot of times I'll tear out about half of the fiber so it doesn't make it bigger at that section. So when I add it in, it's still like one piece, so to speak. And that just makes neater rope if you want something to be very uniform and strong all the way through. That's just a simple way to make cordage. All kind of plant fibers work, but the one you hear about a lot in books is called sinew or sinew. The tendons in your body and stuff are just long, very strong strings. And this went to a deer's toes. He's got 2 toes, so he had 2. We would have 5 right here. So he has 2. But you start beating these with a smooth rock, and you think, well, why would you want to use a smooth rock? So you won't cut the fibers, and you start pounding it up, and you can separate all these strings and make them whatever size you'd like. Then on your back, we call them your back straps. You've got these long sections of sinew. I think I've got a section of it here somewhere that I haven't separated out. You can see how long that was off of a larger deer. And when you start separating out, you can see all the fibers, little tiny threads. These are used a lot for sewing because they're much longer. But can you still imagine sitting down sewing your clothes, or a teepee, which thread anywhere from a foot to 18 inches long was about the longest you'd get. So still a tedious process. Now the cool thing about the sinew, you didn't need a needle to sew with. You'd leave the end of it hard, and that'd be like your needle point. Then you just use an awl, A-W-L, a sharpened bone or some stone point, to poke holes in the leather, and you'd feed that little hard tip of that sinew through to sew with. So that's kind of what those were there. But sinew is the strongest natural fiber on the planet. It's good to make bowstrings out of, and anything, sewing, that type of thing. The one thing about sinew though, it does have a natural glue in it. So if you wrapped an arrowhead with this, when it got wet, it would come undone. And even bows sometimes had sinew on the backs of them to make them very strong. And again, the bow stayed home on a rainy day because of those types of things, that water-soluble glue that it had on it.